Hi, welcome back to Brilliant Fools, podcast where your resident fool here, Adam Green, uh, tries to answer some things about business and the things that I've seen over the past couple of decades, just based on uh, based on biblical principles and what's been set out for us in Scripture. You can see us at brilliantfools.com, as you see right here. There we go. As you see right there, you can check out Greenhouse GHS. That's green with an E on the end, greenhouseghs.com, if you want to get in touch with me directly. Um, I want to go over some questions and answers today, and these are just general questions and answers, but a lot of these, they kind of have a theme on this one, and this is about scaling and scaling your business. Different aspects that come into that. The first question that comes up a lot of times is going to be, is now a good time to expand or should I wait? Uh, it's a good question and it's something that should be asked. The answers to that, in my experience, have less to do with outside factors than we tend to think that it does. So a lot of times we'll think, oh, is the economy good enough right now or should I wait? Is really, I mean, that's one of the bigger ones. I'll camp out on that for a second. Uh, the economy being good, doing well or not doing well, can have an effect on whether you should expand or wait, but often and for most people, it doesn't. If it's something like it's coming up on 20 years since the last big recession, and that would be the 2007, 2008 time frame. So we're kind of due for another one. So there might be another one that comes up. But even in that time, even while you had a lot of people losing their shirts, especially in the construction industry, the housing industry, there were a lot of people that were making a lot of money. And not just the people that were investing and made money later. There were people that were making money even in the housing industry. I talked to someone recently whose father was in the real estate business, and they were selling a lot. They had to think a little bit differently in order to do these sales, and they were selling outside of the U.S. in a lot of ways. So, and it took a lot more work. It took a lot more paperwork, and they had to adjust in order to do it. But it wasn't that they couldn't do more business just because everybody else wasn't doing more business in their industry. It was that it had to be a little bit different. So that is often more what comes into play than outside factors like we tend to think of. Um, but there are things that it's good to understand before you start. As an example, I know of someone who had a restaurant, a very small restaurant that did just amazing, amazing numbers, amazing revenues, amazing profits. And so they said, I want to expand. I want to do another place as well. It was a pretty simple, fairly straightforward place. Their biggest issue was that the restaurant they ran would not run without them. So the next place they set up also wouldn't run without them. I also saw this in some auto repair places. Guy had auto repair place that was doing well, so he wanted to set another one up. And in one case, in the restaurant case, the owner didn't let it go, like didn't let another person come in and manage it. So we're split between two locations, and then ended up things were starting to fall apart at this location, starting to fall apart at that location. And this wasn't a franchise, so it wasn't something they already had a system in place that they could just hand off to someone else. But if they did, that might be different, because I know people who've owned several franchises of restaurants, names you'd know: Burger King's, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A's, a little bit different structure on Chick-fil-A, but still multiple Chick-fil-A's, things like that. And there are systems in place, and there are systems even for hiring the right kind of people to put in the right kind of places. So without those systems, it can be much more difficult to expand, especially if you're talking about another location. The auto repair place that I know of that didn't do all that well, they didn't do the right due diligence when bringing on the manager of the other location, and there were issues there. and he needed some more training that he didn't get. So that's multiple locations. But what if you're in the same location? You just want to expand operations where you are. Let's say you're producing a product. It's going to be in-house, in warehouse, and then you're just going to ship it out from there wherever it goes. Well, in that case, again, systems I think are still going to be needed. You're going to need to look at the systems. Essentially, this is counting the cost before you build the tower, right? As Christ talked about, who goes to build a tower and doesn't count the cost before they do it? In the same way, we count the cost before we truly decide to follow Christ, because it will, there are things we're going to have to say no to, right, in the world. And in the same way, when you're expanding your business, there are probably things you're going to have to say no to for a little while until you get that expansion going. In the end, it'll be far better, potentially, if that's what you want to do, which is another question to ask yourself. Why am I expanding? Is that just because that's what I think businesses do, so I'm there and I need to do it? Or is it that I really do think expansion is the right thing for me to do at this point? We're in the right place. You don't have to be bigger. You don't have to. There's the concept of, if you're not growing, you're dying. You can maintain exactly where you are, and you could do very well, and you can do well for your people exactly where you are. And then build somebody else up to come in after you, and they can make a decision if they want to expand or not. So should I expand or not? Maybe, maybe not. But let's say we do decide to expand, even if it's just a little bit, if it's just beyond me, myself. Okay, so should I hire employees in-house, or should I hire contract work? Should I contract things out? And that's going to go into questions of how much do you need to control what it is they're doing? Because the more you need to control what they're doing, the more you have to have them as a W-2 employee and not a 1099 contractor. The more that they get a say over what they do, say like Uber drivers, they can choose who they go and pick up, even though they're using Uber. So therefore they can be a 1099. They can choose their hours. Therefore they can be a 1099. It's just on contract, right? How long do you need them for? How long does that contract need to be? Are you expecting this to be an ongoing thing for a long time? Now we're moving into employee territory. If you just need them for a job as you need them for the job, and they can do something else in the meantime when you don't need them, now we're looking more under contract territory. And when I say something else, I mean like do the same job for someone else. Benefits. Are you wanting or needing to pay benefits to the person in this position? Okay, now we're going to have to start looking at maybe towards a W-2 in order to actually get them the benefits that you're looking to get them, instead of just increasing the money that you pay them. And then the question of, can you hire somebody if they're not a W-2? Even if you could just use them as a contract person, are you going to get the quality that you need out of that? Or does someone really need to be a W-2 employee to have that kind of security? And then you're going to attract a higher level of talent that way. And then there may be other legal requirements, in which case you want to get with a labor law expert and see what may go into that. But those are good questions. Those are good questions to ask. And I know I don't have answers for those right now, but really the answer to the question, should I hire in-house or should I hire on contract, is dependent on your situation and dependent on what the position requires, what the job entails. The less permanent it is, the more agency the person has over what they do, the more they can be a 1099 contractor. The more permanent it is, the more you have control over what they do, the more they use your resources, your computers, your machines, your whatever it might be, your tools, the more they're going to be a W-2 employee, at least in the eyes of a tax law, for sure. So it's good to know those things for sure. So what should you outsource? Given the chance to outsource, should you outsource accounting? Should you outsource HR? A lot of people are doing outsource CFOs. I've done that work. I do that work as well. Some outsource CFOs, controller work. So what should you outsource? And that goes into the expansion realm of, am I struggling to grow without overwhelming the staff or the systems that are currently in place? I may not need a full-time financial officer where I can justify them being in the office 40 hours a week, but I could justify them 40 hours a month, maybe 10 hours a week, maybe 5 hours a week, something like that. And if I can justify that, if that makes sense, then maybe I just need to outsource that. I need to go with a outsourcing company or a VA, virtual assistant. There are a lot of virtual assistant companies out there, and hiring the right one depends on how you want to go. You can go to Fiverr or Upwork and find decent VAs there. That's more vetting on your part at those places. If you go to a place like a Belay, then Belay is going to have done the vetting, and it's going to be more expensive. So those are things to consider as you're considering what to outsource. When you're smaller, I do like those admin functions being outsourced for sure. I see that as a much better use of the money. Otherwise, what I've seen is hiring like a key employee that handles multiple facets of all the admin stuff. So they'll keep the books and they'll keep the AR, keep invoicing and keeping on customers. They'll make sure the bills are paid. Okay, they're handling accounting functions and maybe even payroll functions. But then on top of that, they're also answering phones because you don't get that many phone calls or whatever. You have them in-house answering phones. You have them set up whatever HR things need to be done. You may have them oversee insurance and other kind of admin obligations. But eventually, as you grow, that it would be wise, at least, to start separating those functions. Especially in the area of anything that has to do with money. If the same person receiving the money is also the person that's depositing it into the bank, is also the same person that's, overseeing all the receipts, not just cash or check, but any kind of receipts. And that's also the same person that's keeping the records of the books. You can probably see where that could come into some shady areas. So that may be where you need to start looking at what can I outsource, what's practical. You can look at the money aspect, straight at the money aspect to determine how much would it cost to have someone in-house versus to have this outsourced. I can outsource it maybe for $1,200, $1,500 a month, but it would cost me $2,000 a month to have someone in-house doing the same work. But maybe that in-house person is more beneficial for you to have in-house. And when you're considering those, you've also got to consider what other expenses come with putting someone on a W-2. You got to pay their half of Social Security and Medicare, the FICA tax, right? You've got to pay unemployment taxes. You've got to pay potentially benefits and other things. So there are other things that come into play. It's not just that straight salary that you say you're going to pay them. So keep that in mind as well. Also, as we look at the expansion side of things, a lot of times people will expand by bringing in another partner. At auto repair, right? I've seen that where somebody wants to go to another location. Somebody already has a location over here, or they've had a really good employee and they're like, okay, you can go run this location. But then you bring them in as a partner. So how do you do that without losing maybe that control that you have, with addressing the challenges of that transitioning leadership, so to speak? It's not necessarily that you're exiting entirely, but maybe you are. Maybe that's part of it too. You want to bring someone in so you can exit. Exiting smoothly and profitably. First of all, it's rarely ever smooth. It can be profitable the entire time, but it's rarely ever smooth. But this is a large part of knowing who you're working with. Do not be unequally yoked. That's a big part of it. And that doesn't go just for marriage. It does go for marriage, But our encouragement to not be unequally yoked is to make sure that whoever we are partnering with has the same view that we have, or the same overall vision. Let's put it that way, not view. It's good to get different viewpoints, but the same vision that we have as far as being a part of what God's doing in the world through our business. If not, if they're just out there for the money and they're just trying to make more money, that's going to be it's going to create a lot of issues, and those are things you don't want to run into so much. And maybe retaining control is not the idea. Control, first of all, tends to be a false positive. It feels like I have control over what's going on, and maybe I do have control over certain things, but again, I can plant, I can water, but God provides the growth. So there's a lot of things I don't control. And relinquishing some of that control can be good, as long as that control, if we're on the same page, if I'm equally yoked, then I know that it's God who ultimately controls my business and directs it ultimately. I plan where it's going to go, and then the Lord directs the steps. And if someone is not on that same page, if they're not coming at it from a biblical basis, that biblical foundation, then I'm not going to get into bed with them. Well, I hope I won't. That's hopefully I would be strong enough on that, not to get in bed with them. And if I am in Christ, then I think I would be. But that's one of those things that who you're talking with is more important than I think most anything else. So what if you need to expand, but you're not sure how, as far as technology is concerned, pricing is concerned? A lot of people come in and they'll come in new with a very low price, or maybe even they're just trying to eat up market share, so they're pricing pretty low so they can pull people in and gain customers that way. Pretty common tactic. Personally, I don't see it as a long-term tactic. So if someone's doing that, if a competitor's doing that, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Wait that out a little bit to see if that's actually sustainable. However, it is nice to be able to figure out what I can do, how much more value can I add without increasing the price, or can I add more value and decrease the price? If I can do that and still be very profitable, maintain my margins, all those kinds of things, man, that's a huge competitive advantage at that point. And that's a huge advantage when it comes to scaling and expanding at that point. A lot of newer competitors will start with newer technology too, which, if you're talking about software, it's easy enough to get to a newer software. There may be a learning curve. There may be some transition cost to that in order to pull things over, depending on what kind of systems you're talking about. Full ERP, so enterprise resource programs. Is that right? Whatever that stands for. Anyway, full enterprise software. So you're talking about your client management software, your accounting software, your job tracking software, things like that. When all of those come together and you try to switch to a new one, there can be costs associated with that. But it's more easily done a lot of times than an entirely new machine. So if you were in a different industry, say the printing industry or some sort of production, and you've got machines that have been running for a while and they've run well, but now new competitors, you've been in the business for so long that newer competitors are bringing in newer machines, yours are breaking down, and or you're having to keep up. They won't produce as much in the same amount of time as your competitors will, so you can't charge the same. Now it's time to start looking and say, okay, what can I do here? How can I address this, meet this head on, be the head, not the tail, right? As God told Israel to do. How can I address it and get ahead of it and make sure that that this is working? And it may take some time to save up a little bit of money to be able to either get the new machines or start to get them financed, even with something down. But you've got to weigh those numbers out beforehand, count the cost before you build the tower, and then get into it that way. But it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. If you don't have a plan for it and you just want to get it just because, again, when you count the cost, you'll know if those numbers work out and if they make sense, or if they're even necessary for you to do. If you're tracking your KPIs, we'll get into KPIs at a different time. And then last but definitely not least, I don't have time to work on my business because I am just working in it all the time. It's a good question. How do I work on my business instead of in it? And typically what's going to happen is you're going to have to put in some hours to get things set up to where you can start working in it less. And you're going to have to put in some time to find the right people to bring in or contract out to be able to delegate certain things to. You're going to have to find that time. The good news is you're not alone. This is all part of scaling. I like what a friend of mine had said about it is there's a few questions you can ask yourself. One is what decisions are stuck in your head that no one else on your team feels permitted to make, or maybe you don't have anyone else on your team that is permitted to make. Which bottleneck would unlock the most growth if you stopped owning it? I can think of one or two in my own business that is probably a pretty big bottleneck that I need to address. But number 3, I like this one a lot. If you disappeared for 30 days, what would break? What would improve? There may be things that would get better if you were not there for 30 days. So asking yourself those questions is a good idea. This is part of scaling. As he would put it, you're not failing, you're scaling. And this is part of expanding. There's a tool that I like to use, and you likely already know it. I think most people already know it. Let's see if this works. Yep, here we go. And it is the Eisenhower Matrix. And I just kind of threw something together here. If you're looking at it on the screen, you can see the Eisenhower Matrix. And it's split up into 4 quadrants. You've got urgent here and not urgent. Okay, urgent's on the left, not urgent on the right. Important up top, not important down at the bottom. If it's urgent and important, then you do it. I do, right? I do it. Not marry it, but I do it and just get it done. These should not be a lot of things. A lot of things feel urgent and important, but they aren't. Okay. So in other words, something could be not urgent, but still important. And at that point, you need to decide. You need to decide when you're going to do it. Schedule a time to do it. Okay, this is important, but doesn't have to be done right now. So I need to schedule that and figure out when I'm going to do it because it needs to be done. And it's something that you need to do because of it being important. You as the business owner, you need to decide on that. Or this could be for executives as well, if you're top level executive, right? But then you've got something that's not important, but it is urgent. And holy crow, does this take up so much of our time. It has to be done, but it's not that important. And this is a lot of where that working in your business, not on it, comes from. It's got to be done. And you know it is, and it's on your mind. Okay, I just need to go ahead and do it myself. I need to do it. But it isn't as important as the other things that you have going on. And when that's the case, this bottom left, as much as you can, try to delegate that. And that could be something as simple as answering the phones or answering your email. Things that a virtual assistant could do. You could delegate that out to a virtual assistant, and they can filter out and give you what's important and what's not. But it's urgent. Need to get through it, need to get it done, but it's not important. You can delegate that out. And then finally, if it's not urgent, not important, this bottom right section here, just delete it. So do decide, delegate, delete. Get rid of it. Get it out of your life. If it is not urgent and not important, then you don't have to do it. Now, when I say that, I mean when it comes to business, there are things, well, actually, I would put this in the important category. to be able to take a break, to be able to rest, to be able to have some enjoyment. I would actually say that's important. It can oftentimes be seen, I can see it anyway, as not urgent, not important. I'll just get rid of it. No fun. But it's good to take a break from that. It lets your brain rest. It lets your mind rest. Helps me to reset and renew. But otherwise, yeah, if it's not important, but it has to get done as much as I can, I need to delegate that if I'm overworked in the business. If it is not urgent, but it is important, well, I need to figure out when I'm going to address that because I need to address it. So let me get it down on my schedule right now. And then if it's important and urgent, then go ahead and do it right away. And hopefully those important and urgent things won't take over. That's where the leadership development comes in, where you can start leading other people in such a way that you build them up to be able to take over a lot of that urgent and important stuff. And you start to trust people with that. Hopefully this has been helpful. More of a Q&A type session today. In the end, the whole reason of doing this is because God has chosen the foolish things of this world to confound the wise, right? And I would rather be a fool for him than wise in the world, wise, wealthy, and wicked. I don't want to be that. I'd rather be foolish, well off, and in his will, and abiding in him. And in him, he takes care of all these things, all these questions that we have. In fact, you don't need this podcast. You don't need me, as scripture would put it. You don't need anyone to teach you. You have the Holy Spirit because of what Christ did, because of his death, his resurrection. He's paid for it all and beyond that. And he wants us to have abundant and full life, eternal life, beginning now, not just in the future. And that looks like less worry. That looks like an easy yoke, a light yoke, a light burden, as Christ said. So that's one of those things that is both urgent and important. But it's also not as urgent as right in your face. And that's spending time with God, spending time in his word, spending time in prayer, being still, knowing he is God, meditating on it, bringing it back to mind. And then all these questions, they start to get answered. I don't even know how to really explain it, except that it starts to get answered. And in the meantime, there is wisdom there's wisdom in being able to speak well. That's when there's wisdom. Now, there's wisdom in an abundance of counselors. And if that's something you need, a second set of eyes, someone else to come alongside you, understand what's going on, being able to ask the right questions to dig down to where things are and how things apply to your situation, I would love to be a part of that, and I'd love to talk with you about it. So reach out to me, get in touch with me, and I will talk to you on the next one. Thanks.